of all the jobs that were created since Obama took office, 2/3 came from the immigrant population. And looking at this chart, as you can see, just over, I believe, 1 million jobs were created as far as the immigrants were concerned. Sorry, 1.94 million. As far as the natives were concerned, that's kind of a weird word, but that's how they term this, 938,000 jobs were created during Obama's administration. Again, a lot of numbers, so let's just make this easy for you. The numbers don't sound that bad, but considering there's a lot more natives than there are immigrants here. So job growth for natives here in the United States, 0.8% under his watch. 9.2% increase for immigrants. So I want to bring in an expert on this, and actually a gentleman who gave us these numbers. Stephen Camarata, Director of Research for the Center of Immigration Studies. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So let's take a look at this number. We have 2/3 of job growth coming from immigrants versus natives. Where is this coming from? Is this something that Obama administration is doing versus prior administration? Is just the fact that there's more immigrants coming into our country? How is this number so significant and so different?
Right. Well, there is a long-standing trend, even before the president took office, of much of the job growth in the United States going to immigrants. As a consequence, if we look at the working age, the core working age, 18 to 65-year-olds, of the native-born population, they're working less and less. And that's a long-standing trend. So as immigration has gone up over the last 3 decades, the fraction of Americans or native-born Americans holding a job has been coming down. However, the Obama administration has been a pretty bad time. During the Bush administration, for example, about 44% of the net gain in jobs went to foreign-born workers. During the Obama administration, it's about 67%. And most of that is not immigrants here sort of regaining employment after the recession. It's mostly new arrivals, and that's because our legal immigration system, mainly legal, remains so generous. Over 1 million new permanent legal immigrants a year, and then hundreds of thousands of new guest workers are allowed in each year. We're bringing in, roughly speaking, 80 to 100,000 new foreign workers every year since the recession began, and as a consequence, they ended up with about 2/3 of the net increase in employment.
Okay. So, I mean, you're not really putting the blame too much on the Obama administration is what I'm getting from you. It's more of an immigration issue. But let me just play devil's advocate here for one moment. I look at this and I kind of think, well, maybe it's the fact that, especially during an economic downturn, two portions of jobs become available. Very low-end jobs, which a lot of natives will not take, but immigrants will. They'll be willing to move around for low-paying jobs. And how about kind of the upper-end skilled workers? I hear from a lot of people who run businesses that they cannot find skilled workers, where there's a lot of immigrants that come over that meet this criteria. So maybe it's the fact that it's just bad timing and not the fact of the immigration situation.
Well, there might be, a lot to what you just said, but the thing of it is the immigrants gain jobs throughout the entire labor market. So in like building, cleaning, and maintenance jobs, or personal care jobs like barbers and nail salons. So that's more the lower paid, lower skilled, not unskilled, but lower skilled. But they also made very significant gains in management jobs, in computer science and math, in engineering and architecture. So they made gains across the whole labor market. And it could be that the jobs are ones that Americans don't want. However, when we look at the data, these are jobs that are currently overwhelmingly done by native-born Americans. And if we look at the unemployment rate for natives in those occupations, it does tend to be high. For example, of the 6 major occupational categories where immigrants gain the most jobs, there are well over 2 million native-born people who are unemployed. That is, they say they're actively looking for a job, and the last job that they had was in one of those occupations. So what seems to be happening is there are a lot of Americans out there in these occupations looking for jobs, but they are going to the immigrants.
So,
on the question of Obama, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Stephen, this is Amy Holmes. Sorry to interrupt. But I do have a question about the competition in the labor market between these new immigrants taking low-skilled jobs and the African-American community. Matt McCall, he mentioned the 14.3% unemployment rate among African-Americans. And we had President Obama introduce this temporary amnesty program that would grant temporary amnesty to, I think, 800,000 illegal immigrants between the ages of 18 and 30. How does that impact, then, the job seekers in the African-American community?
Right. Well, that would be an example of maybe a lot of competition that's coming at the bottom or the lower end of the labor market. The president is offering legal status and, most importantly, work authorization to about 2 million people. Several 100,000 have already applied. So that would be an example where the president has likely done something that has intensified job competition. Other things they've done throughout their administration is when they conduct what's called a workforce work site enforcement action, they just audit the employer. But all the illegal immigrants, they just tell the employer to fire them, and those illegal immigrants are allowed to go and seek new employment elsewhere. Whereas in the past, they would be arrested and typically deported. So the administration has done some things that have likely increased job competition, but it is true that the system kinds of runs on autopilot, which does lead to the big question. Given the focus on jobs, it is amazing that so many jobs are going to new immigrants coming from abroad, and that issue hasn't even been discussed in the presidential race by either candidate.
All right, I will really quick, we don't have a lot of time, but how do you think this affects the vote? I mean, you still see the African-American vote going towards Obama, even though you're seeing unemployment rise at the same time.
I don't think it affects the vote
Right.
at all.
It probably won't have that much.
I don't think it affects the vote at all because I think that at this point in time, what Romney said in the debates about reforming immigration was very sensible to me, and it seemed like that was something that people could get behind during a Romney administration. I don't think a lot of people are going to be voting necessarily for Romney based on that. And in terms of these numbers, the big numbers are what matters, Matt. The things you're talking about, the 23 million people that are underemployed, unemployed, or dropped out of the workforce, that's what really hammers home. And then the state-to-state numbers in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida.